Okay, so let's recite together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the sublime, the victorious, and the totally self-enlightened one. Okay, welcome everyone. So today we are going to start with cittanupassana. We just finished Vedana-nupassana, the contemplation of feelings last week. And today we are going to another section, another foundation of the four foundation of mindfulness, which is the contemplation of consciousness. Okay, everyone ready? Yes? Okay. So first, let's begin with some basic information about consciousness or citta. Now, according to the Buddha's teaching, consciousness is not a static thing that does not change. What we call mind is actually a stream of consciousness arising and passing one after another in extreme speed. It is said that in a blink of an eye, billions of consciousness have arisen and have passed away. So each of these citta is a combination of citta and cetasika. So consciousness and mental factors. They always arise together and cease together. Since there is no citta that can arise without cetasika, or no cetasika that can arise without consciousness, citta, this combination is usually referred to as citta in general, or consciousness in general. So one unit of citta that arises together with cetasikas, and then it stayed for a moment, it exists for a moment, and then it passes away. Another citta arises together with its associated cetasika, arise and then passes away, like this arise, passes away. And so this stream of consciousness, this continued flow of citta, of consciousness, arising one after the other, is what we call the mind. Sometimes we will use the word citta or sometimes vijnana, which is actually a synonym. We need to understand that it means citta and its associated cetasikas, because it arises together and ceases together, right? So wherever there is citta, there is always some cetasikas that arise together with it. Now, to make it a little bit easier to understand, we can imagine citta to be, say, a plate, and cetasika to be the ingredients. Now, but please understand that this is only an example. It is not perfect, because with citta, in reality, there cannot be any plate without ingredients. No? So it must always be a plate, the citta, together with some ingredients. No? And also there is no ingredients without a plate. So imagine if you go to a restaurant, and when you look at the menu, you won't find just an empty plate, right? So it's always a dish with something, some ingredients, and then when the dish come, when the food come, it always come with a container, right? So they always come together as a set. So it's like citta and cetasikas, they always come together. So although they always arise together, citta and cetasika, they have different characteristics and they perform different functions as well. Citta has the function to cognize, while cetasika are the ingredients that give taste to that citta and that which differentiate them. So citta, consciousness, the job of consciousness is to know the object, is to cognize the object, while cetasikas are the ingredients that define what kind of citta or what kind of consciousness it is. So each cetasika also have their own characteristics and function. According to the Abidhamma teaching, there are 89 or 121 types of different kinds of consciousness, different types of cittas, and there are 52 kinds of cetasikas that can be divided into three groups in general. The first one, those are the cetasikas that are called ethically variable. And then we have another group, which is the unwholesome mental factors. And then we also have some beautiful mental factors. Now, what does it mean by ethically variable? Ethically variable means those cetasikas, those mental factors that can associate with the wholesome or with the beautiful, or they can associate with the unwholesome also. So depending on with what other ingredients they associate with, then that citta will become, let's say, if it associate with unwholesome cetasikas, with some ethically variable ones, then it will become an unwholesome consciousness. And if it associate with some beautiful ones and some ethically variable ones too, and then that will make say a wholesome consciousness. So depending on what ingredients is there, the different types of consciousness, there are different types of consciousness. But some of them, they are mutually exclusive. For example, those beautiful ones and unwholesome ones, they never arise together because they are the opposite of each other, right? So there are different combinations. Just like cooking, depending on the combination of the ingredients, we can make many different dishes, right? So with the different combination of cetasikas, there are the different types of consciousness. Okay, so now, for example, greed, aversion, delusion, or one-pointedness, generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are some examples of cetasikas, of mental factors. So when these mental factors arise, they always arise together in a group. They never arise alone. So they arise in a group together with certain kind of consciousness. So although in this section of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the contemplation of consciousness is being emphasized, but when consciousness and mental factors, they cannot be separate. So when we say we observe consciousness, we actually also observe the mental factors that arise together with them. Let's say when we recognize that anger has arisen, so we are observing a consciousness that is accompanied by anger. So in this sutta, it is called sadosam citta. Sa means with, together with. Dosa means aversion or anger. And citta means consciousness. So sadosa citta or sadosam cittam means consciousness that is associated with anger. So in these 89 or 121 types of consciousness, they can be categorized into different groups according to their features. Now here in this sutta, 16 kinds or 16 groups are being introduced. So let's take a look. What are they? The first group is called saraga citta. That means consciousness with lust or attachment. Sa again means together with. Raga means lust or passion or desire. So throughout the Tipitaka, the three baskets of the Buddha's teaching, many different words are used to describe greed or desire or attachment, such as raga, passion or lust, tanha, craving, upadana, grasping, avijja, covetousness, ichcha, wish, desire, longing, kamachanda, sensual desire, geda, greed or yearning, pipasa, thirst for something, asa, longing, etc. So there are many different words are used to describe desire or lust or attachment, no? But all of these words, in ultimate reality, they all only refer to one mental factor, which is the lobha cetasika. So although all these words are different words are used to describe the different way of attachment or desire, in ultimate reality, there's only one cetasika. It refers only to lobha, greed or attachment. Now, lobha, the range of lobha is very huge. It can be very subtle or it can be very gross. So subtle ones like a little bit of liking or just some preference, wanting or yearning, to self-indulgence, seduction, attachment, covetousness, lust, and even all the way to obsession and more. No? So it can be very subtle and it can be very gross too. So all these are manifestations of different degree of lobha or greed or attachment or any names. No, since it can have many different shades, so we generally just use the Pali term lobha to mean whether it is subtle or gross. Attachment or greed is attachment, so lobha, right? Now, subtle lobha is very tricky, because it can be pleasing, it can be delicate, tender, refined, gentle, and it can appear to be harmless. Even sometimes it can appear to be sympathetic and even compassionate. But beneath its external forms, it is always striving in one way or another to satisfy its fundamental grasping nature. So that's lobha, right? Now let's take a look at the 4 devices of lobha to understand it a little bit more. The characteristic of lobha is grasping an object, to grasp, to want and to hold on to the object, whatever it may be, the object of the greed. And then its function is sticking. So desire is very sticky. Once it desires something, it will stick to it. In the Visuddhimagga, it is said that it is like meat put into a hot pan, like that, very sticky. And its manifestation is not to give up. Once there is lobha, once the mind wants something, it does not give up. It clings to it, it wants it, and it attached to it. So that's the manifestation of lobha. And then its proximate cause is seeing enjoyment in things that lead to bondage. Oh, that's very serious, right? So when we see wrongly, when we see enjoyment in things that actually lead to bondage, that caused us to want it, because we think it is good. So greed arises because of that. Now, throughout the whole Tipitaka, many terms are used to describe lobha because this is a very, very important cetasika. It is actually the second noble truth. Because of craving, we are here, right? Of course, craving together with delusion, moha also, but craving is a very important ingredient for our prolonged turning around in samsara. So throughout the Tipitaka, many different terms are used to describe it. For example, in the Dhamma Sangani, the first book of the abidhamma basket, the following definitions for lobha is being given. It's a long list, so it's very interesting. If you are interested, you can look for it there. So all this are the definition or description of lobha. Many. So all of these words are described there. So if you're interested, you can take a look. Okay, so now let's go back to the sutta itself. We haven't started with this section. For the section of the cittanupassana, it starts with Katancha pana bhikkhave bhikkhu citte cittanupassī viharati. And how, bhikkhus, does the bhikkhu dwell contemplating the consciousness in the consciousness? Ida bhikkhave bhikkhu saragam va cittam saragam cittanti pajanati. Vitaragam va cittam vitaragam cittanti pajanati. Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu knows the consciousness with lust as consciousness with lust, the consciousness without lust as consciousness without lust. So the first group here we see is Chit saragam cittam, so consciousness that is with lust. And then the next group, vitaragam cittam, so consciousness without lust. So these are the first 2 groups that we need to be aware of. So whenever they arise in the mind, we need to be aware and observe them. So earlier, I mentioned that in this sutta, there are 16 kinds or 16 groups of cittas are being introduced, right? So these are the first 2 groups. So let's take a look of saragam cittam first. So consciousness with lust or attachment. Now, consciousness with lust or attachment, here the word raga is used, but it actually means lobha cetasika, right? So, saragam citta means those consciousness that is associated with the lobha cetasika, whether it is subtle or obvious. So every time we recognize that there is attachment, greed, desire, or lust arising in the mind, we know a consciousness with greed has arisen. That includes attachment of all kinds, right? Attachment to material things, to ideas, to mental feelings, or even being proud of one's own achievement or whatever it may be. So those consciousness that arise together with lobha are called consciousness with lust or with attachment. Then what are the cittas that are consciousness without lust, vitaraga citta? Vitaraga citta, consciousness that is not associated with lust or attachment, are those that are not associated with lobha. Say when we are helping others, having compassion, being generous, or practicing meditation or practicing loving kindness, we recognize that at that time, there are consciousness without lust or without attachment. So this kind of consciousness are called consciousness without lust or attachment. Then you may say, how about when we are angry or when we are without? Those are consciousness also not associated with lobha, no? It's not with greed or with attachment when we are angry, no? So can we say these are vitaraga cittas? Can we say it is consciousness without lust? Well, the answer is no, because they belong to another category in this sutta, in this different division, right? Those are consciousness with hate and consciousness with delusion. So here we do not include them into this classification. Then how about jhana cittas and magga and phala? Path and fruition consciousness, which are the supramundane consciousness that arise when one gets enlightenment, right? Or jhana, those are cittas that definitely does not associate with greed or attachment. Now here, jhana can also be called vitaraga citta, consciousness without lust or attachment, but magga and phala is not included in the contemplation of consciousness because they are not the object of vipassana meditation. Rather, those are the consciousness that will arise when the practice mature. No? Those are the consciousness that we would like to attain, no? At the end of the practice. So here, magga and phala is not included, is not among the object of meditation, of vipassana meditation. So therefore, it is not included, although they are without lobha or without attachment. Okay, well, here I'm only explaining in general terms, because some of you might not have studied the different kinds of citta according to the abidhamma yet. So if I enumerate which type of citta exactly are included in each category, it will be a little bit complicated for some. So since here, with this sutta, we are more focused on how to apply this practice in our daily life, a general explanation will be helpful for that purpose. But for those who have studied the different types of cittas and are interested, later on I will share with you a list so you can check which citta exactly are included under which category or under which group, right? Okay, so here I will not name them one by one. Okay, so let's see what other groups are mentioned in the sutta, right? Well, before we go there, until here, all good, everyone? Yes? Okay, no problem? No question? Okay, right. Okay, so let's continue to see the other groups. So let's see what is the third and fourth group. It says, sadosam va cittam, sadosam cittanti pajanati. A bhikkhu knows the consciousness with hate as consciousness with hate. Vitadosam va cittam, vitadosam cittanti pajanati. The consciousness without hate as consciousness without hate. Samoham va cittam, samoham cittanti pajanati. The consciousness with delusion as consciousness with delusion. Vitamoham va cittam, vitamoham cittanti pajanati. The consciousness without delusion as consciousness without delusion. Here we have two pairs, with hate, without hate, with delusion, and without delusion. So these are the other groups of citta which we have to be aware of when they arise. Okay, so let's take a look of dosa, right? Sadosams, dosa. Now, dosa, aversion, just like lobha, greed, dosa also has a very wide range. It can be subtle, it can be gross, just like a little bit of boredom and uneasiness, disgust, annoyance, resentment, irritation, repulsion, fear, detestation, anger, hostility, ferocity, rage, and even hatred. So it ranges from very subtle dosa or aversion to very gross form of manifestation, right? So all of these are different manifestations of dosa. All of these are called dosa, even just a little bit boredom or uneasiness. Sometimes when we say dosa, because usually it is translated as hatred or anger, so we feel like it is something quite strong, right? But actually, dosa also refers to just very tiny bit of don't like or uneasiness or even boredom or fear also. It is all included in dosa. So let's take a look at the 4 devices of dosa to understand it a little bit more. Now, the characteristic of aversion is ferocity. When there is dosa, one is very fierce, rough, or even cruel. It is compared to a snake that is hit by someone. When a snake is hit, it will strike back, it will raise its head, and dosa is like that. And its function is to spread or to burn up its own support. So say if we put poison into water, for example, it will spread all over. So in the same way, when there is anger or hatred in one's mind, it spread all over the mind. So the mind is all spread and filled with dosa, with aversion. Or the other function is to burn up its own support. So dosa burns up the mind and body in which it arises. So just like this log, when it is burning, when the fire is burning, it actually consumes the log, right? So in the same way, when there is dosa, when dosa is arising, it consumes us. It consumes the physical body as well as the mind. Anger can cause the person to get a stroke or high blood pressure. This all we all know, right? It can cause a lot of physical ailment as well as mental problems also. So that's the function of dosa, to spread, to burn up its own support. And its manifestation is afflicting with suffering. That's quite clear and obvious. When there is dosa, there is suffering, affliction. There cannot be happiness when there is dosa. And its proximate cause is a ground for annoyance. And what does that mean by a ground for annoyance? Now, according to the book of analysis, the Vibhanga, which is the second book of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, it is explained that when one thinks he has done me harm, or he is doing me harm, or he will do me harm, or he thinks he has done, he is doing, he will do harm to one dear and pleasant to me. Or he thinks he has done, he is doing, he will do good to one not dear and not pleasant to me. Thus, hatred arises, or hatred arises unreasonably. So this is the ground for annoyance. Now, if we think someone is doing or has done in the past, or is doing in the present, or will do in the future, will do harm to me or to my dear ones, then anger arises. Or also, even if the person is not doing any harm, if he's doing good, but to someone that I don't like, then also anger can arise. So this is called the ground of annoyance. Or sometimes hatred or anger or dosa can also arise unreasonably. Unreasonably, how unreasonably? So there are some kind of anger that is called groundless anger or anger without a valid reason. For example, when the weather is hot, then we get angry and say, why is it so hot? It's too hot. Or it is too cold. It's too cold, and it is so cold, and the bus is not coming yet. No, so these are kind of not reasonable, right? So, but we do get angry sometimes with this kind of unveiled reason. So this is called groundless anger. Or have you seen someone that maybe accidentally hit on a table and get angry and kick the table, right? So those are called the unreasonable anger or groundless anger. So whether it is based on those thoughts that we have just saw, that some other people may do harm to in the past, present, or future to us or to someone we loved, or do good to someone we don't like, or whether this is this kind of unreasonable anger. So anger can arise, or actually quite easily. So it is important to be aware of even any small amount of aversion. That might even seem harmless. Sometimes just starting with a little bit of like boredom, or like boring, or that's already the start of dosa, no? Because they can grow and they can accumulate. So we have to be careful. Remember, Sayadaw Tejaniya taught us that we have to reset to 0, no, to not let it accumulate, because otherwise it can go from 0 to 10 and then to 100. All right, so we have to look at what is dosa, or the 4 devices of dosa. So let's take a look of what is meant by consciousness with hate or aversion, sadosa citta. So sadosa citta refers to consciousness that is associated with the dosa cetasika, whether it is subtle or obvious or in any kind of manifestation. So every time we recognize that there is hatred or boredom or anger, depression, sadness, even stinginess, disgust, or envy, or jealousy, remorse, worried, and all this, we have to know that it is considered consciousness with dosa, so sadosa citta. Okay, so then what are the consciousness that are without hate or aversion? Vitta dosa citta, consciousness without hate and aversion. So those are the ones that are not associated with dosa. The wholesome consciousness that we have seen that are without greed are actually also without hate or without dosa. But some of them are more obvious that they are the opposite of dosa. No? For example, loving kindness or compassion or taking care of others, that are the direct opposite to dosa. Sometimes the other wholesome cittas, for example, being generous or those kind, might be more obvious in the sense that it is without greed or without attachment. But they are all without hatred and without attachment. Because with greed and with attachment and with aversion, we cannot do good, right? Okay, so here jhana citta can also be included in consciousness without dosa. So that's consciousness with and without hatred. That's the other 2 groups. So let's take a look at moha also, the other set, with delusion or without delusion. Now, moha, what is moha? Delusion or ignorance, delusion. It is actually the king of defilements. It is the boss. It is like a ninja who throw the smoke bomb and deludes the mind. So we don't know what's going on. We can't see. With delusion, the mind cannot see. Moha is also described like or compared to like a magician. It covers up or it hides the real nature of things. So it is like a blindfold. Moha blindfolds us, so we do not see the true nature of things. We do not see that things are impermanent or dukkha and anatta, so unsatisfactory and non-self. It makes us see the good in the bad and the bad in the good. So that's delusion, right? So let's take a look at the 4 devices of moha. Now, delusion or mental blindness, its characteristic is mental blindness or unknowing. So this unknowing, it means not knowing or not understanding the true nature of things. That's the characteristic of delusion. And its function is to conceal the real nature. So it hides it, and so we cannot see the true nature anicca, dukkha, and anatta, the characteristic of mind and matter. And then its manifestation is the absence of right understanding or mental darkness. So it is like darkness. It is compared to darkness. So if there is no light in the room, we cannot see anything. So moha is compared to that darkness, and wisdom is actually compared to light. When we turn on the light, then darkness is gone and we can see things clearly. So it's the opposite of wisdom. And its proximate cause is the unwise attention. So ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention. So not paying attention in the correct way. Okay, so samoha citta, consciousness with delusion, refers to those consciousness that are associated with moha, associated with delusion. Now, what kind of consciousness are associated with delusion? Actually, all kinds of unwholesome consciousness are always associated with delusion. So whether it is also with greed, with hatred, or just purely don't know, like having doubt or just being restless, all these kind of unwholesome consciousness are included in this group. If there is delusion, if there is no delusion, then there cannot be any unwholesome action. All kinds of unwholesome action is associated with moha, with delusion. So those that are not associated with moha are the next group, vitamoha citta, consciousness without delusion. Those are the wholesome consciousness that we have seen. Again, they are without greed, without hate, and also without delusion. But here we have to be careful, because not associated with delusion does not mean that it is associated with wisdom. Some wholesome consciousness may be with wisdom, but some can also be without wisdom, right? Okay, so without delusion does not mean that it is with wisdom. Okay, that's important. All right, so far, all good? Yeah, okay, so let's continue. So those are the consciousness with delusion and without delusion. Let's see what's next. Now the next group is called samkitam va cittam, samkitam cittanti pajanati. A bhikkhu knows the constricted consciousness as constricted consciousness. Now what does that mean by constricted consciousness? Constricted consciousness refers to a type of consciousness when we are oppressed by sloth and torpor. So when we are sleepy or lazy, those are called constricted consciousness. They arise together with two cetasikas called tina and mida, among others. So let's take a look at these two cetasika, tina and mida. Tina, translated as laziness or sloth, mida, translated as torpor. So tina and mida are actually two different mental factors, but they always arise together as a set. So when there is tina, there is mida. When there is mida, there is tina. They always arise together. They are the sluggishness of citta and cetasika. It is mental heaviness or lack of enthusiasm. Tina is described as the sickness of citta, and mida as the sickness of cetasika. So therefore they arise together. No, when the citta is sick, the associated cetasikas are also sick. So tina and mida is like the citta and cetasikas, they are not well, they are sick. So when there is tina and mida, one doesn't feel like doing anything. The mind is not alert. Now let's take a look at the 4 devices of tina. First, laziness. The characteristic of tina is lack of driving power. And then the function of tina is to dispel energy or effort. So it's the opposite of energy or effort. No? So it kicks away energy, no energy at all. That's the function of tina. And then its manifestation is the sinking of the mind. It feels heavy, it feels like tired and sleepy, so sinking of the mind. And its proximate cause is the unwise attention to boredom or drowsiness. So we're paying unwise attention to boredom and drowsiness, and therefore laziness arises. Then how about mida, torpor? The characteristic of Mida is unwieldiness. Its function is to suffocate the mind. No? So the mind is not working well. And its manifestation is drooping, nodding, and sleepiness. So sometimes when we are tired, when we are sleepy, we do that. No? So those are the manifestations of Mida Topa. And its proximate cause is unwise attention to boredom and drowsiness, just the same as Tina. So these two, they are the opposite to energy. When there is energy, slot and topper cannot come into the mind. If we have energy, we don't feel sleepy, right? So when we experience sleepiness, sometimes it can be very hard. The body and mind is just so heavy and we cannot control it. Sometimes it may be physical, so it is not all the time unwholesome. Tina and Mida is actually an unwholesome cetasikas, but when we feel tired or when we feel sleepy, it might not always be unwholesome because sometimes if the physical body is tired, then we need to get some rest too. So depending on the situation, if sometimes we are just being lazy, then those are unwholesome mental state. And this unwholesome mental state is said to be like the withering of a plant that curls and falls under the burning heat of the sun. So it feels like that. Now, many times when Tina and Mida arise, we surrender and they just overpower us and we go to sleep instead of exerting more energy, right? But for Arahants who are totally free from defilements, they never sleep or rest because they are overpowered by Tina and Mida. They sleep when their physical body becomes tired and need rest only, so never because of Tina and Mida. Okay, so that's what's called the constricted consciousness. So let's look at another type in the sutta. So the next one is called Vikitam va chittam, Vikitam chitanti pajanati. A bhikkhu knows the scattered consciousness as scattered consciousness. So the next group is called scattered consciousness. So we have to recognize whenever the mind is being restless. So this scattered consciousness refers to the type of consciousness that arises when we are restless. Now, what is restless? It's actually the cetasika mental factor of udacha, restlessness. So let's take a look of how is udacha. Restlessness is disquietude, distraction, or turmoil in the mind. When there is restlessness, there is no mental calmness, enabling the mind to consider the object clearly. So the mind is all over the place, cannot see the things clearly, cannot consider the object which that mind is taking, that consciousness is taking, cannot see it clearly. There is no calmness for that. Now, the characteristic of udacha, restlessness, is disquietude. It is like water whipped by the wind. So when there is wind, the water is not still, it is rippled. So it feels like that when it is restless. And its function is to make the mind unsteady, makes the mind shake. It is like a flag flutters in the wind. So the mind is like that. Very restless is the function of udacha. And its manifestation is turmoil. And it is compared to ashes which rise up when a rock is thrown into the ashes. Have you seen that? If you throw thrown a rock into the ashes, it just throw up and it becomes very cloudy, just like this. So when you throw a stone into a heap of ashes, the ashes rise up and it's all clouded. So it's very scattered. So the mind with restlessness is like that, all clouded, all over the place. And its proximate cause is unwise attention to mental disquiet. So that means it does not understand the real nature of mental disquiet, so therefore it doesn't care whether the mind, whether there is mental calmness or mental quietness or not. So therefore it conduces to restlessness. Now, this word, the literal meaning of the word udacha is shaking above. Above what? So shaking above the object. That means the mind cannot take the object properly. It's shaking. And also, udacha is also sometimes described as distraction. So the mind is not being firmly on the object. So that's restlessness. And here it is one category in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So whenever we notice that the mind is restless or it is scattered, then we need to know that those kind of scattered consciousness has a reason, and we see it as they are scattered consciousness as scattered consciousness. So consciousness associated with sloth and torpor are called constricted consciousness, and those that are associated with restlessness is called scattered consciousness. Okay, so all good until here? Yes? Okay, so let's continue a little bit more. Now the next group is called Mahagatam va Cittam, Mahagatam Cittanti Pajanati. Amahagatam va Cittam, Amahagatam Cittanti Pajanati. A bhikkhu knows the consciousness that has become great as consciousness that has become great. The consciousness that has not become great as consciousness that has not become great. So here, Mahagatam, consciousness that has become great, and Mahagatam, is the negation, so not. Consciousness that has not become great. What does that mean? And consciousness that has become great refers to the jhana consciousness. So they have become great because the jhana consciousness are more refined consciousness through meditation. They are not worldly, like the one we saw last week, not in search for sensual enjoyment. They are more well-trained types of consciousness. So it's called here in this group, consciousness that has become great. And those that has not become great means the other types of consciousness pertaining to the sense sphere, whether they are wholesome or unwholesome. So those are the consciousness that has not become great. Okay, so let's take a look at the other group. The next one is called Sauttaram va Cittam, Sauttaram Cittanti Pajanati. Anuttaram va Cittam, Anuttaram Cittanti Pajanati. A bhikkhu knows the surpassable consciousness as surpassable consciousness. The unsurpassable consciousness as unsurpassable consciousness. Sense sphere consciousness are called sauttaram, surpassable consciousness here. Whether they are wholesome or unwholesome, those are the consciousnesses that arise in our day-to-day life. Those are called the surpassable because we can recognize that they are not the best type of consciousness as far as human potential is concerned. There are better mental states, right? So those are called the surpassable, while the unsurpassable here means the more refined types of consciousness due to the practice of samatha meditation. So those consciousness that are the material jhana and immaterial jhana consciousness are called unsurpassable here, because they have temporarily suppressed the 5 hindrances and are with high concentration, right? So they are the drupavachara citta and arupavachara citta, consciousness of the material sphere and immaterial sphere. Now here to understand these different groupings, some abidhamma knowledge will be helpful for understanding. But in general, you can understand it this way. So those consciousness that are more refined with meditation and those that are pertaining to the sense sphere. Now, sometimes the material sphere consciousness are also included in the surpassable side because they are still not the best. In comparison to the immaterial sphere consciousness, the material sphere is still surpassable. So therefore, they can also be included in the sauttaram, surpassable. But if we are comparing it to the sense sphere consciousness, then they are unsurpassable in that way. So say consciousness with attachment, is surpassable because there are better ones. The wholesome consciousness are better than those unwholesome consciousness. Then those wholesome consciousness, they are still surpassable because with the practice or with the training of the mind, there are better quality types of consciousness, right? And for that also the jhana chittas or those consciousness that arise in the material sphere are even higher. And so in this way, they are called surpassable and unsurpassable here. Now again, although we have mentioned about this, but I will just repeat it again. Because you may think that why are jhana chittas called unsurpassable if path consciousness and fruition consciousness are actually the highest, no? So jhana is not the highest, they are still surpassable, right? That's because, again, here we are talking about the consciousness that are the objects for the contemplation of the mind, for vipassana practice. So supermundane consciousness are not object for vipassana, for meditation purpose. So we are practicing to attain them. So we cannot take them as the object of contemplation, right? So therefore, in this context, the supermundane consciousness are not included in this category. So let's see what is the next one. Samahitam va chittam, samahitam chittanti bhajanati. The concentrated consciousness as concentrated consciousness. Asamahitam va chittam, asamahitam chittanti bhajanati. A bhikkhu knows the unconcentrated consciousness as unconcentrated consciousness. So here, concentrated consciousness are those consciousness that are with upachara samadhi, access concentration, that is like very close to jhana, or kanika samadhi, moment-to-moment concentration for the practice of vipassana, or appana samadhi, which is absorption concentration that associate with the jhana chittas, right? So those are called concentrated consciousness. And then those unconcentrated consciousness means those consciousness that are not associated with these three kinds of samadhi, these three kinds of concentration. So whether they are wholesome or unwholesome, it doesn't matter, as long as they are not associated with these three types of samadhi or stability of mind concentration, they are called unconcentrated here in this sutta. Okay, so now we've come to the last category here, which is vimuttam chittam, vimuttam va chittam, vimuttam chittanti bhajanati. Avimuttam va chittam, avimuttam chittanti bhajanati. A bhikkhu knows the freed consciousness as freed consciousness, the unfreed consciousness as unfreed consciousness. Sorry, here typo, it should be as. Okay, so freed consciousness are those that are free from defilements temporarily or momentarily. So those are the vipassana consciousness or jhana consciousness, which are temporarily or momentarily free from all kinds of defilements. So those are the wholesome consciousness, right? And then the unfreed consciousness here are all those that are not free from defilements. So all the unwholesome consciousness are included in the unfreed consciousness here. Now again, usually when we see the word vimutta or freed in the other places throughout the Tipitaka, it usually means the arahata phala consciousness. So that's the fruition consciousness of the arahats, no? So those are free, totally freed consciousness, no? But according to this context here, it means the consciousness that are momentarily or temporarily free from defilements, because it is about practicing the vipassana meditation, about the contemplation of the mind, right? So, okay, so altogether, there are 16 groups of consciousness mentioned in this section. So let's take a look at them in the list because we just went through very quickly. So as a summary or recap, we have seen those kinds of consciousness which are called saraga citta, consciousness with lust, vitaraga citta, consciousness without lust, sadosa citta, consciousness with hatred or aversion, vitadosa citta, consciousness without hatred or aversion, Samoha citta, consciousness with delusion. Vitamoha citta, consciousness without delusion. Sankita citta, constricted consciousness, those that are associated with tinamida, laziness and sleepiness. Vikitta citta, consciousness that are scattered, that are associated with restlessness. Then we have Mahagata citta, those consciousness that has become great. So those are the material sphere and immaterial sphere consciousness. Then we have Amahagata citta, consciousness that has not become great. So those are citta that pertain to the sense sphere. And then we have Sauttara citta, surpassable consciousness. Anuttara citta, unsurpassable consciousness. Samahita citta, concentrated consciousness, those that are associated with the 3 types of samadhi. Asamahita citta, those that are not associated with those 3 kinds of samadhi. Then we have Vimutta cittam, freed consciousness, here referring to those that are temporarily free from defilements. And Avimutta cittam, those that are unfreed. So that means those that are associated with defilements. So these are the 16 group of consciousness that is mentioned in this section of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. The contemplation of consciousness. So whenever we recognize that any kind of any citta that is arising at this present moment, we need to know what kind of consciousness is this, whether it is with lust, without lust, with hatred, without hatred, delusion or not. For those of us who has not yet attained any jhana, so this that has become great or unsurpassable or concentrated, those that do not arise in those that do not have jhana, right? But for those that have attained jhana, then they can recognize also this type of consciousness. And for us, usually those who do not have jhana, then these ones are very popular, popular or common. Those are with attachment, without attachment, or delusion, or with and without, because wholesome consciousness also arises in us, right? So all this we can't be aware of. Okay, so why don't we take a break here, and then coming back, we will talk a little bit more about these different types of consciousness. Okay, so we'll see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so in the first part, we have seen the 16 groups or 16 types of consciousness that are mentioned in this section of the sutta. So far until here, any question? Is it clear? All clear? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I have been speaking, I think, a little bit fast. So one thing after another, one thing and after another. So I hope it was clear. And in case that it is not clear or you have any question, just please feel free to ask. Okay. All right. So there are many different groups of consciousness here that are mentioned in this section. And Sayadaw Usilananda, he said, you need to know abidhamma to understand all these different kinds of consciousness. However, it is not necessary to be able to differentiate the various kinds of consciousness by their respective names. It is sufficient that you are aware when you are sleepy that there is sleepiness, when you are distracted, you note the mind is distracted, etc. No? So during our practice, we do not need to be too much concerned about how this type of citta that we are observing at the present moment is called, etc. As long as we know their characteristic, we know whether it is with attachment or not, with aversion or not, whether it is with sloth and torpor, with restlessness, etc., then it is good enough for when we are practicing. But if we do have some abidhamma knowledge, we can extend the contemplation a little bit further. Especially for the contemplation of consciousness, the abidhamma knowledge is very helpful. Previously, we mentioned that raga, for example, raga, in ultimate reality, it is lobha cetasika, right? So I will here just use the saraga citta, consciousness with lust, as an example of if we have some abidhamma information, how we can extend the observation. In the abidhamma, it is said that there are 8 types of unwholesome consciousness that are associated with lobha, and they are called the greed-rooted consciousness. So consciousness that are rooted in greed. And what is meant by root here? Now, there are 6 types of cetasikas that are called roots. So what are they? They are lobha, greed is one kind of root. Dosa, aversion. Moha, delusion or ignorance. Then we have, on the other hand, alobha, which is the non-greed or generosity. Adosa, non-hatred or non-aversion or loving kindness. Amoha, which is non-delusion, that is wisdom. So these 6 types of mental factors are called roots. Because of these mental factors, those consciousness that arise together with them become very strong. Just like when there are roots, a tree is firm and stable and strong. In the same way, when consciousness are associated with any of these 6 roots, then they become strong. Those consciousness that are not associated with root, or just like trees that does not have root, they are weak and unstable. No? So with consciousness is the same. So this lobha or dosa or moha, alobha, adosa, amoha, they make the consciousness very strong. So sometimes there are consciousness that are associated with one root, for example, only moha. Sometimes they're associated with 2 roots, moha and lobha, so it's even stronger. There are 2 roots there. Sometimes moha and dosa, 2 roots also. Then for the wholesome consciousness or beautiful consciousness, they usually arise together with alobha and adosa, non-greed and non-aversion. So these 2 together, strong, and sometimes it is even stronger if it arises together with wisdom. So 3 roots also. So those are very strong kind of consciousness. All right, so this is what is called root. So there are 8 types of consciousness that are called greed-rooted consciousness. So that means with this kind of consciousness, the greed must always be there. The root is there. Delusion also is there. But not only greed and attachment and delusion. Sometimes some other unwholesome mental factors can also arise in this type of greed-rooted consciousness. Just like ditthi, wrong view, or mana, pride or arrogance. So these mental factors are in the lobha group. They are in the greed group. So if we notice that there is wrong view at the moment, or that there is pride or arrogance at the moment, then we can also understand that those are also considered saraga citta. So consciousness with lust, they are also included in this group. Now, why is wrong view and mana, or pride and arrogance, included in the lobha group? It is actually not difficult to understand, because when there is wrong view, the mind is attached to the idea or to the view, right? So it is associated with greed and attachment. And with pride and arrogance, it is explained as a desire for self-advertisement. So that's all very obviously the desire to for self-promotion, the self-advertising. So that's associated with greed and attachment also. So these 2 are also included in the lobha group. Now, the 4 devices of these different mental factors, whether wholesome ones or unwholesome ones, all of them, they are also explained in the Anatomy of the Mind course, the previous course that was given. So if you are interested, you can find them on the YouTube channel. Then there are more detailed explanation of each of the cetasikas, each of the mental factors with the 4 devices and some explanations also. So here I'm not going to explain all of them. Okay, so when we recognized that there are consciousness with lust, if we have some of this kind of information when we are observing, what we can do is that we can also be aware of whether this saraga citta, the consciousness with lust that we are observing, is associated with wrong view or not, or whether it is associated with pride or arrogance. And then also, what kind of mental feeling is accompanying it? Now here you see only 2, either somanassa or upekkha, no? So that's with pleasant feeling or with neutral feeling. There is no unpleasant feeling here because unpleasant feeling never associate with the greed-rooted consciousness. When we want something, when we like something, usually we have a pleasant feeling towards it and we want it, no? So if we or sometimes neutral feeling also possible, but we never don't want something and want something at the same time. So we do not have aversion to what we want, right? So therefore, domanassa, the unpleasant mental feeling, never arise together with greed-rooted consciousness. So we can also be aware of the mental feeling when we are observing. Then we can also know what kind of object it is desiring. For example, it could be sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, ideas, family or friends, or our qualifications, or even the meditation practice. Lobha is very tricky. It can attach to anything, basically. So even wholesome things it can get attached to. So if we have information, we can also observe a little bit further all these other factors or elements that is related to this consciousness with attachment or lust or desire. Okay, so once we are aware that some consciousness with defilement has a reason, we need to work to remove them or to not let them arise again, right? So how do we do that? That is by awareness together with wisdom. So this is the practice of satipatthana. No? So we have to be aware, we have to have effort, we have to apply the clear comprehension and grow in wisdom in order to remove or not let this kind of defilements arise. For example, when we see something and we think it's beautiful and we think it's good, then a desire for it will arise. And later, when we find out that it is actually poisonous or it is harmful for us, then the desire for it fade away. So it is through understanding and wisdom that we remove defilements because we know that they are not good. They are not good for us. They are harmful for us. Therefore, the desire for it will not be so strong anymore, or it will be eliminated because we know, because of knowledge, because of wisdom. And this is not only related to greed, it is the same for aversion and for delusion. Now, delusion itself is a little bit more difficult to be aware of because it is delusion itself, no? So it cannot see. One time there was a student who asked his teacher, he says, "Teacher, I can be aware of lobha and I can be aware of dosa, but I cannot see moha." Then the teacher said, "This is like riding a horse and asking where is the horse, because it is already there. Yeah, when we don't know, it is already there. Delusion is already there. So what we can do to counteract with delusion is by developing its opposite, that is wisdom. So only by developing wisdom, we can counteract delusion. So when consciousness that is without defilement arises, we also know that consciousness without defilements have a reason. We also have to observe that. We observe their quality, and we also need to develop understanding about this kind of wholesome consciousness, not only about defilements. We have been talking a lot about the different consciousness with defilements, but with the wholesome ones, we also need to know. It is like cooking. When we know exactly what ingredients, the quantity, and the method, we can reproduce the dish, right? So when we observed and learned about the wholesome consciousness, how does it feel to the mind? What qualities are there? Why do they arise? What contribute to their arising? then we can recreate similar conditions for them to arise more and more often, right? So therefore, it is also important to observe and learn about wholesome states whenever they arise. There was once a yogi, she asked Sayadaw Tejaniya, she said that the mind has become peaceful and she doesn't know what to do. This can happen to us also because we are very used to the chaotic mind, restless mind, mind with greed and with aversion. So when the mind does become peaceful and calm, we suddenly don't know what to do about it. So Sayadaw Tejaniya said we should also observe it and learn about it, learn about the wholesome state, how they arise and what are their quality, and remember them, remember how they feel. And so later on, we can also create conditions for them to arise more and more. Okay, so the contemplation of consciousness is to observe the different types of consciousness that arise at the present moment and to know them. Whether it is with sloth and torpor, whether it is with anger, whether it is scattered, with lust or attachment, or whether it is concentrated, or it can be also without attachment, with generosity, or it can be with wisdom. So whatever it may be, any type of consciousness, when they arise, we have to notice them and watch them. And another important thing here is to recognize every time that they arise without further attachment or an aversion towards them. So we do not want to follow, or we do not want them to go away. What does that mean? That means that, for example, when we notice, say, consciousness with lust has arisen, then we acknowledge, because we are learning, we're observing, right? So we do not think that, I am having lust at this moment. We do not look at it that way. We have to be objective, and we see that consciousness with lust has arisen at this moment. We acknowledge it, but we do not follow the story of that craving. We do not continue thinking about that. And we just look at it and know how it is and learn from it. And then it may fade away also. And then we see how it arises and how it passes away. And also when we notice that, on the other hand, we also don't want to push it away. We do not say that, oh, I'm so bad, like I'm thinking about this or that, and I don't want this kind of consciousness to arise. Then dosa arise, right? The aversion arise. So we do not want to have further defilements while we observe. If we notice, because it can happen, if it really happened, then we have to step back and first observe that defilement that has just arisen. For example, some kind of consciousness arises and we are seeing it. And then the observing mind, let's say, is contaminated because it does not like it. It wants it to go away. So there is aversion already arose. No? So what we now need to do is we need to watch that aversion first. And then later on, if that kind of, let's say, attachment, consciousness with attachment arise again, then we can observe again. But we always have to deal with the closer defilement first. So we step back and see and make sure that the observing is objective and it's not with further defilements, right? Okay. And also when we observe wholesome consciousness also, we also have to know that they are also not permanent. They are also anicca. They are also dukkha, unsatisfactory, and they are also non-self. They arise because of causes and conditions, and they cease also with causes and conditions. So that's why in this sutta, it is said that the meditator, they know, say when a consciousness with lust has arisen, they know consciousness as lust, with lust as consciousness with lust. So that means that we understand that this consciousness as consciousness only, not as my consciousness, or not as my mind, or I have lust. No. So consciousness is only consciousness. There is no one there. It arises because of causes and conditions, and it ceases when the causes and conditions cease. So we see consciousness correctly in the right way. Consciousness as consciousness, not as my consciousness. So that is important. Okay, so Meditators observe different kind of consciousness that is arising, and we investigate about them, their characteristics, their functions, how are they manifested, whether they are permanent or not, satisfactory or not, whether there is a self or atta in there or not. During the contemplation of consciousness, it is actually one consciousness is the object of another consciousness, right? So it is consciousness seeing consciousness itself. Now, the consciousness that is with the awareness that knows this consciousness that knows this other consciousness, they actually cannot arise at the same time. They cannot arise at the same moment. So the consciousness that is the object of meditation arose just a little bit earlier than the consciousness that knows. And this consciousness that knows arise just a little bit later after the consciousness, which is the object of the knowing, right? Because no two consciousness arise at the same time. There's always one after the other. So they do not arise at the same time, but still we can still call them present, because vipassana, we have to observe in the present moment, we say. So although it is just a little bit after or a little bit before, we still call that the present moment, because there is only a very small difference in time when we contemplate on consciousness, right? We also know that what we are observing, it arises and then it passes away too. And another knowing will arise. So neither that consciousness that we are observing, the object, nor the observing mind are permanent. They all arise and passes. So we can even know the observing mind, right? Well, you can know whether you are having mindfulness or not at the moment. Can you know? Can you know that the mind is having mindfulness or not? We can know also, no? So the mind can also recognize the observing mind also. So that's the way how meditators keep observing consciousness, but we have to understand that the observing mind is also not permanent. It's not the same consciousness that is always looking at the different types of consciousness. It's different consciousness arising and then passing, and then another knowing also arises and passes, knowing also arises and passes. It is also anicca, dukkha, and anatta, the observing also. Okay, so every moment is new. Every consciousness is new, and the knowing also is new. The object also is new. It's like a river flowing. It's like a river flowing one after another, one after another. So we observe the different types of cittas and understand their characteristic and so on. For those who have jhana, after emerging, they can also observe those jhana cittas. And then after observing those jhana citta, they can also observe the jhana factors, those mental factors that arise together with that jhana. For example, in the first jhana, vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, and ekaggata. Now here, contemplating about citta and cettasika is the contemplation of the four immaterial aggregates, right? About mind. And then when the meditators also see that mind arise depending on rupa, then they proceed to contemplate on the material aggregate. That's the rupa or metta, no? So the five aggregates of clinging are the objects of vipassana meditation. So both mind and matter must be contemplated. Then the meditators, when they contemplate on the heart base, then they also know it heart base also do not arise alone. It always arises together with the four great elements and some other types of dependent matters as well. So meditators can contemplate on the heart base and also on the other types of matter that arise together and discern their characteristic function and manifestation of them also. So in this way, meditators contemplate on both mind and matter, nama and rupa, so all the five aggregates of clinging, which are the objects of vipassana, and understand that there are only mind and matter arising and passing away. So there is no being or no individual and no self there, only mind and matter running their own process, right? Okay, then the sutta continues just like the other sections. Iti ajatam va citte cittanupassana viharati, bahida va citte cittanupassana viharati. Ajata bahida va citte cittanupassana viharati. Thus, he dwells contemplating the consciousness in the consciousness internally, or he dwells contemplating the consciousness in the consciousness externally, or he dwells contemplating the consciousness in the consciousness both internally and externally. That means the meditators contemplate internally that consciousness are only consciousness. Whatever type they may be, they arise and they passed away because of cause and condition. They do not belong to any beings. So in the same way, they contemplate internally, they also infer that in other person as well, there is also only mind and matter. Consciousness arises because of cause and condition. So there is no individual, no being that possess that how do you call that? That owns those kind of consciousness. So that is externally. So when meditators contemplate internally and externally, so about here there is no person, there is also no person. So back and forth, that's internally and externally. Then the sutta continues just like the other sections. Samudaya Dhamma nupassana cittasmin viharati. Vaya Dhamma nupassana cittasmin viharati. Samudaya Vaya Dhamma nupassana cittasmin viharati. He dwells contemplating the origination factors in the consciousness, or he dwells contemplating the dissolution factors in the consciousness, or he dwells contemplating both the origination and dissolution factors in the consciousness. So meditators comes to see the origination factors, which means the causes of mind and matter. No, so the causes of origination factors of consciousness, which are ignorance, craving, karma, as well as cetasika and rupa. Because of these factors, consciousness arises. And dissolution factors means the absence of the same. So then the meditator proceeds to the contemplation of causes of both mind and matter, and finally also contemplate on the dependent origination. Remember, so all of this we have seen in the previous section, so we will not repeat it here. So the dependent origination in the normal order and the reverse order, the meditators will contemplate on that. Then Ati citanti wa panasa sati pachupatita hoti. Or his mindfulness is established as there is consciousness only. Again, here consciousness only does not mean consciousness only, but because we are in the section of consciousness, so therefore it is said like that, but we understand it's mind and matter both, no? Okay, and that mindfulness is established to the extent necessary for further knowledge and mindfulness. So as we have seen in previous section, there are different stages of purification and different level or different stages of vipassana wisdom. So the meditator will continue to contemplate and proceed to the contemplation of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, of any kind of mind and matter. And then later they will be able to see the arising and fading away of mind and matter, or whatever they are experiencing. Then they will reach higher and higher stages of vipassana wisdom until they reach the level of arahantship, where there will be no more wrong view and clinging to the five aggregates. So not depending on or attached to anything by way of craving and wrong view he dwells, nor does he cling to anything in the world of the five aggregates of clinging. Thus, too, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu dwells contemplating consciousness in consciousness. So this is how meditators contemplate on the different kinds of consciousness as mentioned here in this section of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Okay, so here we have finished with this section, but just a little bit more detailed I would like to share with you. Now, this contemplation of the mind is not just to be practiced only during sitting meditation. this is to be applied in our everyday life. Vipassana is to be practiced all the time. Remember in the previous section, we said that whatever posture, standing, sitting, walking, lying down, in any time, any moment, we need to apply the four foundations of mindfulness, right? So for cittanupassana, contemplation of mind, also not only sitting meditation, but anytime, anywhere we can practice. It can be whatever we are doing, whether we are at home, at work, in the street, even in the toilet, and anywhere, we need to know what is happening in the body and in the mind. The more we can be aware, the more understanding we will gain, and the less we will suffer. And eventually, the final goal is to eradicate all kinds of defilements. Imagine without defilements, there will be no more problems at all. All the problems and trouble that there is, those are all because of defilements. Just think about it and see whether this is true or not. All our troubles and problems and whatever worry, everything, all are because of defilements. All right, so far we have seen contemplation of the body, contemplation of feeling, and contemplation of consciousness or the mind. So we can apply this anytime, anywhere. Awareness of mindfulness can know different objects at the present moment as they become apparent to the mind. It can be body sensation, it can be movement, it can be thoughts, sounds, whatever, or different types of consciousness, wholesome or unwholesome. Whatever the mind can know at the present moment, we just observe it continuously, objectively, with right view, knowing that feeling is only feeling, body sensations only body sensations, or movement is only movement, thoughts or consciousness are only consciousness, thoughts are thoughts, imagination only imagination. All these are just, they are rising because of cause and condition. They are not me, they are not mine. So we have to observe it in the right way. That is called with right view. So whatever the mind can know at the present moment, we just observe it continuously. We don't have to choose the object. The four foundations of mindfulness need not be practiced separately, because in reality, they all happened. They can all happen at any time. So we don't have to say, I'm practicing only cittanupassana, I'm only looking at the mind and nothing else. It's not possible, because the mind also can know feeling. The mind also can know the body, right? So anything that the mind can know, we apply. So four foundations of mindfulness are to be practiced all together. Actually, they include all the five aggregates of clinging. So they are all object of vipassana meditation. So we don't have to choose only one type. So all of them. Then when we apply mindfulness and effort, stability of mind or concentration will be built. Then also we apply clear comprehension, which is wisdom. And when the practice gain momentum, it will naturally grow, and wisdom will also follow. It will grow also. Then we will be able to see anicca, dukkha, and anatta nature of all mind and matter. So that's the practice of satipatthana. So far we have seen the three foundations and we have completed them. Congratulations. And next week we are going to Dhammanupassana. So that's the contemplation of the Dhamma, which includes 5 sections there. So it will take a little bit more explanation for this Dhammanupassana. We won't be able to finish it in one session. So it will take a few sessions in order to cover the 5 different categories which are mentioned there. So we will start that next week. Okay, so that's all for today. If you have any questions, we still have a little bit of time. Yes, Judy?
Hi, Hedik. We are today at the mindfulness of Citta and Citta. And the last session, we has contemplated on the feelings. So my questions, which I wish to seek your clarification is, isn't feeling the contemplation of feeling, which we did last week, isn't that one of
the foundation,
the mental factor? It is one of the foundation.
Vedana is one mental factor also.
Yeah, so Vedana is one mental factor, and it's under one of the 7 universal.
Yes. mental factors.
So do we, because like you explained, citta cannot arise on its own. It requires citta. So when we contemplate mindfulness of feeling, so it is actually at the same time also contemplating
The
citta.
mind. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So as I said just now, we cannot separate them totally, right? So when we know the feeling, what knows the feeling? The mind knows the feeling, no? And feeling is also part of the mind. So, but why are they separated into different contemplations? That's because feeling is very obvious. It's very obvious. So if we contemplate emphasizing on feeling, then we can say that we are, that is, let's say, Vedana nupassana, that we're doing contemplation of feeling because we're putting emphasis on the feeling. Now, if we are putting emphasis, say, on the citta, let's say the greed-rooted consciousness, let's say we recognize or aware that there is a consciousness that is arising together with attachment, and we are more putting the emphasis on the consciousness itself, then it is more like the contemplation of the consciousness. So it depends on where we put the emphasis, no?
I see. Okay, that is very clear. And I also have another follow-up questions, right? Feelings. Last week we discussed about feelings where there's pleasant, unpleasant, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Okay. Put the third one aside first. Now, feelings when it's pleasant, unpleasant, right? Am I correct to say that feeling is one of the 7 universal, and it comes together with, if it's pleasant, it is wholesome mental factors, and if it's unpleasant, it is unwholesome mental factors. Or
Not
feeling by
necessarily.
default actually come in these 3 flavors.
Not necessarily, because all kinds of consciousness, the ones that we saw today, it's good that we saw consciousness today because we saw those kinds of that associate with lust or with attachment. Then we also saw those that associate with dosa, with aversion, associate with moha, with delusion, right? And also there are some that are the jhana, with jhana. So those are consciousness that are unsurpassable, or those that are concentrated, right? So we saw different groups, no? So all of this consciousness, whatever kind they may be, they always associated with some kind of mental feeling. Because a mental feeling is Vedana, it's a universal cetasika, no? So depending on the type of conscious, it doesn't matter what kind of consciousness. No, I should not say like that. Okay, I start again. So I should say, for example, pleasant mental feeling. Pleasant mental feeling can associate with lobha, obviously. We just saw, no? When there is greed, that when you want something, how do you feel? You feel pleasant, no? Because, yeah, I want it. That's why I want to go shopping, no? So that desire and that pleasant feeling is associated with attachment. So that means that pleasant feeling do not always only associate with beautiful consciousness or wholesome consciousness, right? So for example, when the person is in meditation and attain the first jhana is associated with joy, with happiness, right? So those are also pleasant mental feeling. Those are also associated with pleasant mental feeling. So those kind of consciousness, jhana, where absorption consciousness, very high type, refined type of consciousness, right, can also associate with pleasant feeling. That's also possible. So it does not depend on whether it is wholesome or unwholesome, that it is pleasant or unpleasant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So what determines whether it's pleasant, unpleasant? Is it the causes, the condition at that part?
Well, to answer this question,
or is it our attitude towards that happening, that experience, our attitude towards it, whether we like it or dislike it, we push it away, or we accept it as it is, or it is because of our past karma that attributed to whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. So which part of it?
Okay, now I will answer your question in 2 ways. Okay, practical way first. Practical way. Practical way depends on your attitude. So if practical way. So because usually when we like something, then there is a pleasant feeling towards it, like with attachment, right? If we don't like something, we have unpleasant feeling, that we're angry with it, no, or we don't like it, no. So that feeling depends on our attitude. Those are concerning jhavana chittas. Jhavana chittas means our reaction towards the experience. Okay, so they are either wholesome or unwholesome. So depending on our attitude, if we have good attitude, then maybe instead of reacting with dosa, which associate with unpleasant mental feeling, something we don't like, maybe we can react with understanding, like a wholesome mind that is associated maybe with neutral feeling. Right? So in those cases, concerning jhavana, concerning our reaction, it depends on our attitude. And this is where we have more control in a way, right? Because that is our practice, no? Depends on us. So therefore, I said this is practically first answer because of that. That is what we can do, right? So another answer that I can give you, it's more analytical, okay? For that, there are different types of consciousness. Some consciousness are resultant consciousness. Okay, so those kinds of resultant consciousness, where the types of mental feeling that is associated with it, we do not actually, whatever our attitude may be, we cannot change it. Okay, because those are resultant consciousness. Yeah, so in order to make it very clear, we have to have knowledge of abidhamma to know all the different types of consciousness and what kind of mental feeling they associate with and why. No, so I cannot here in a few minutes explain everything to you. So I think for us, for the practical way, depend on our attitude is maybe good for practice enough for now. Okay. Okay. Yes, Edith.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I was just like when you were explaining about all the types of consciousnesses and just I mean it felt like or I understood that the practice would be to follow all the mental experiences, for example, and or feelings or whatever comes up, basically whatever is in the focus of the experience that is more prominent, right?
Mm-hmm.
My question is like in our tradition, we actually use like an anchor, right? Because otherwise the mind would just go endlessly to our like the next and the next and the next object, basically. So what would be then the training? Like how do you learn to bring the mind back or redirect your mind basically towards wholesomeness? Because you can also just be very caught up with anger like constantly or greed. So I mean just following the next and the next mind to me seems wrong.
Well, an anchor or primary object, sometimes we call, let's say sometimes people use the breath or sometimes people use the rising or falling or whatever primary object, then they always observe something. And when something come out and then they come back to that primary object and then observe something and come back to the primary object. So this is helpful for beginners. So when we start practicing, if we just watch the mind, we get lost very easily, as you said, because we may fall into the story and then we just roll on and we forget everything about mindfulness and we are just thinking, right? So that primary object, when we when we recognize that the mind is gone, there is no mindfulness at all, then the person will come back to the primary object. And so with the primary object, it is helpful for that training, no? So for it not to get lost. But if the mind is skillful enough, if it has experience watching the mind all the time, that anchor can actually be the observing mind. You can know whether the mind is with awareness or not. Just check that. Because if there is awareness, the mind will not get lost in the story. So it is not like, as you said, that we just roll on following the mind and having the story. That is totally without mindfulness already. So if the mind notice, if there is the knowing mind is there, then the mind knows those minds and is not following the story. It's just observing. It's just seeing what's happening. And those stories, they cannot roll on because the mind is watching it. It's just learning from it, right? So at that time, that primary object or that anchor can be the observing mind. And then when, let's say, a story or something, I remember yesterday somebody said something really nice and that was so good. So I was having attachment towards that, for example. So that arised. And then the mind is knowing, the mind is doing that at this moment, right? So some defilements, attachment is there. And then that cannot roll on, or it does not have full power because some percentage of the mind is knowing it. So it's not 100%. No, so some percentage is looking, so that cannot roll on too long, or it might stay a little bit, but when the mind is there, when it's looking at it, and when it is with wisdom, then that will also fade away, usually. Unless that is too powerful, then the wisdom is not powerful enough. So we may have to again learn from it, watch it. No, so so not depends on the person, also on the practice. Not everyone needs to have let's say breath or physical object as an anchor.
Okay, so going with what you just mentioned, so the observing mind would observe itself, right? Like it would observe that there is the mind observing the mind. So let's say no defilements, no other experiences come up. So would the main object remain the observing mind observing the mind?
Yeah. Yeah, but it is quite unusual that nothing comes up. When you say nothing comes up, maybe you mean no defilements or no attachment.
Yeah, or experience. So no remembering, no thoughts, no nothing.
Yeah, but still there should be some kind of experience because all the time experience is happening. So yeah, we can know, for example, when we say no experience, maybe the mind is very peaceful. So peacefulness is also an experience.
Peace, yeah.
So we know the peacefulness and observe that and learn from that.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Thank you.
Welcome. All right. Anyone else?
Tom has a question in the chat.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Hearing about sloth and torpor and restlessness reminds me of the 5 hindrances. However, where is doubt? Okay, thank you. Doubt is actually associated with delusion. So when there is doubt, you can recognize it as consciousness with delusion. Because it is not knowing what is right. So therefore we're doubting, no? So that is delusion prominent. And actually about the 5 hindrances, that's the first topic in the Dhamma nupassana. Next week we are going to talk about the 5 hindrances. So yeah, so it will be covered there. Okay, welcome. All right, anything else? All good? Okay, so in this case, that we will stop here today, and next week we will start with the 5 hindrances. So let's close by reciting together, and we dedicate our effort for the attainment of Nibbana, and we also share merits with all beings. Okay, so let's recite together. Itam no punyam Nibbanassa pachayo hotu. Itam no punyam Nibbanassa pachayo hotu. Itam no punyam Nibbanassa pachayo hotu. Itam no punyam savasatanam bhajima. Itam no punyam savasatanam bhajima. Itam no punyam savasatanam bhajima. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Mahasadhu, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you, sadhu everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.